What's up, Taiwan? I'm Olivier with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The Philippine military and their U.S. counterparts are engaged in massive war games known as Balikatan. It comes as tensions between Manila and Beijing over competing maritime claims reach a boiling point. Rick Glauert brings us more from the Philippines.
Fending off a mock attack from above. Philippine troops and their US allies launch air defense drills in Zambales on the Philippines' west coast facing the South China Sea, using for the first time the Marine Air Defense Integrated System, or MADIS, brought in from the States. A mobile weapon system built to take down hostile drones mid-flight.
Extremely important that we learn from each other, that we are able to discuss coastal defense strategies, that we as the United States Marines are able to bring our weapon systems here to the Philippines to aid in that coastal defense concept.
The hundreds of soldiers here are being joined by thousands more for 3 weeks of annual joint US-Philippines war games called Balikatan, meaning shoulder to shoulder, being held for the 40th time.
Joint drills like this aren't new, but showcasing new weapon systems like this MADIS send a clear message that the Philippines and defense ally the US are ready to face an evolving threat, a threat coming from China.
Beijing claims the area off Zambales coast, along with most of the South China Sea, as its own territory. Though the waters and islands here are within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, China has been increasingly sending military boats and aircraft to assert its claims.
You are flying too close. You are very dangerous and endangers the life of our crew and passengers.
China's presence near here is rattling the fishing villages that dot the coast. Boat owners don't dare go out as far as the contested reefs for their daily catch anymore. Many instead charge tourists for trips around nearby bays to make ends meet.
Para nawawala na rin po kami ng karapatan. Parang ang karapatan namin ng mga tao na Pilipino na kinuha na po ng mga banyaga.
Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been pushing back against Chinese aggression, calling out Beijing's actions, bolstering defense, and chasing greater military cooperation with the US and other regional allies. This year, both Australia and Japan are joining the Balikatan drills.
The United States is the cornerstone. It's the country's only treaty ally. But bringing in all of these nations, they see it as a way to support, their legal legitimacy and international backing.
China has made clear its objections to this show of international solidarity, and it's been throwing its weight around the region, recently sending another carrier close to the Philippine coast and claiming control of an additional reef in the South China Sea. For the people living along the Zambales coast, this rising territorial tension has come to shape their daily lives. Now, on their doorstep, the Balikatan live fire drills mean boats are restricted to shore and incomes are affected. But there's also a sense of reassurance as the nation's military and its biggest ally demonstrates their strength. Fu Hua Hong, David Santos and Rick Glauert in Zambales, the Philippines for TaiwanPlus.
China and the Philippines are locked in a new dispute in the South China Sea, this time over a string of sandbars known as Sandy Key. These little sandbars measure roughly 200 square meters, but have strategic value for both countries. For more on this, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Ray Powell, director of the Sea Light Initiative at Stanford University.
So we see this photo from China holding this flag, claiming what looks like to be this piece of sand in the South China Sea. We're also seeing a similar photo from the Philippines side. Can you explain first what China is trying to do here and why?
The interesting thing about this particular feature is there's a bit of a history here, and it goes back a few years. There were sort of competing claims made on this. Now, the agreement between China and ASEAN that was made in 2002, called the Declaration on the Conduct of the Parties in the South China Sea, says that nobody should be inhabiting any uninhabited features. In other words, if it wasn't inhabited before 2002, they're not supposed to inhabit it now. Philippines owns or occupies T2 Island nearby, what they call Pagasa, and China claims that as well, of course. And so the other thing that's interesting about this particular, Sandy Cay, is that it is legally a rock under international law, which generates a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. Interestingly, China has a huge military base very, very close to this, which legally under international law is only considered a low tide elevation, because before they built it up, it was underwater at high tide. So if they were actually to sort of successfully occupy and claim this particular key, this would be the thing that would kind of give them a little more legitimacy for what they've done at Subi Reef.
And what do you think is going to happen next? Will China send more ships to reinforce its claims here?
I'm not sure that there's anything else that's going to happen here. There is enough going on. The other thing that's happening at the same time, of course, is that the United States and the Philippines are in the middle of their huge annual exercise, Balikatan, which is happening up in the northern part of the country, Batanes, which of course is the part that's closest to Taiwan. So this may be also a bit of just kind of a reminder to the Philippines that we're watching you and we're not afraid to pull these little stunts to continue to assert ourselves.
So when we look at how the Philippines is managing the situation, does this mean that we're going to see more cooperation between the United States and the Philippines?
The last couple of years have been pretty disturbing if you're the Philippine government. You've had a lot of aggression. You've had these rammings and the water cannons and all of the things happening across the entire West Philippine Sea. And that has just forced the Philippines to pull even closer to their best, security partner, which is the United States. It's their only treaty ally. So, I mean, in the end, I think it's hard to say whether China has gained anything from all of this aggression. They've certainly, been able to consolidate control around a couple of uninhabited features, but have they actually won when what they've done is they've woven the Philippines deeper into their U.S. Alliance structure?
That was Ray Powell, director of the Sea Light Initiative at Stanford University. A new investigation details the scale of China's intimidation of government critics living overseas. The 10-month project by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists included interviews with more than 100 people across 23 countries. Many said their families in China were interrogated by authorities after they spoke against the government at protests and public events. Others reported being surveilled, receiving physical threats, or being hacked. ICIJ also investigated internal police documents from 2001 to 2020, finding directions on how to identify and control targets in China. It says these tactics are now being used to crush dissent overseas. South Korea has responded to North Korea's confirmation that it is sending its troops to fight for Russia against Ukraine, calling it an admission of a crime.
북한군이 우크라이나 전쟁에 가담한 것은 유엔 헌장과 안보리 결의를 위반한 명백한 불법적 행위입니다. 이를 공식 인정했다는 것도 스스로 범죄 행위를 자인한 것입니다. 이에 우리 군은 국제사회와 함께 비인도적이고 불법적인 행위를 강력히 규탄합니다.
North Korea acknowledged its actions for the first time on Monday, saying its supply of troops to Russia came under a strategic partnership between the two countries signed last year. State media praised the deployment as a demonstration of their strong military ties. Ukrainian officials say North Korea has deployed around 14,000 troops to the front line. South Korea's main opposition party has named Lee Jae-Myung as their candidate for the upcoming snap presidential election.
지금 이 순간부터 이재명은 민주당의 후보이자 내란 정신과 위기 극복, 통합과 국민 행복을 갈망하는 모든 국민의 후보입니다.
A snap election will be held on June 3rd after former President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office in early April by the Constitutional Court for imposing martial law. Lee narrowly lost to Yoon in the country's last election, but secured his party's nomination with nearly 90% of the vote. Lee advocates for greater economic equality and improved relations with North Korea. Poor air quality across Asia has been a growing concern for decades. Though there are many causes, in Myanmar and other parts of Southeast Asia, smoky skies are often a result of seasonal slash-and-burn farming. As Jonathan Kaplan reports, it's an issue that may not go away anytime soon.
Deep in the hills of Myanmar's Shan State, far from the battlegrounds of the country's ongoing civil war, farmers scorch the earth, not to destroy, but to grow their crops. Shifting cultivation, also known as slash-and-burn agriculture, is an entrenched practice here, passed down through generations.
We've been depending on farming for our livelihood since the time of our ancestors. This is the only work we have because there are no other jobs and opportunities in our region. That's why we continue with shifting cultivation each year. It's the only way we survive through this traditional cultivation.
The practice works like this. Farmers cut down the trees and vegetation on the land they wish to cultivate. After the winter season dries out the fallen plant matter, they put the torch to it. The burn creates a richly fertile area for planting crops. Shifting cultivation has come under heavy scrutiny from governments and environmental groups in recent years, but farmers say they do it responsibly.
While logging and burning cause deforestation and harm the environment, we have our own rules and regulations to prevent this deforestation. We only cut trees and burn the same fields once every 10 years. During that time, we let the trees grow back on the mountains, and after 10 years, we repeat the process.
Agricultural burning is widespread in Southeast Asia. Visitors to tourism hotspot Chiang Mai across the border in Thailand, about 200 kilometers away from Shan State, learn to avoid the late winter burning season when the air is thick with smoke. Doctors like Rungsrik Ganjanavanit say it's a public health concern in Thailand's second largest city.
The effects on the population is very high. Unlike if you have, say, if you smoke, then okay, your risk of having heart attack might goes up 2-3 times, but not everyone smoke. But here, although the risk itself is not as high as smoking, you have to multiply by the exposure rate, which is 100% because everyone breathes, yes.
Back in Myanmar, local leaders say there's no way around slash and burn.
As the Kayan people, we have relied on shifting cultivation and see no alternative ways for the future due to a lack of technology and essential abilities to switch to other farming methods.
The villagers here subsist on the crops they grow on the hillsides, like rice, corn, and chili peppers. They hold ceremonies and celebrations for the burn. And some say the environmental effects of sending whole hillsides up in smoke isn't all that bad.
When we burn the fields in the mountains, it's only for about an hour, not the whole day or week. The smoke dissipates within that hour, and we believe this short period of burning does not significantly contribute to pollution.
The haze may drift elsewhere, but locals say the practice isn't going away anytime soon. Amid the instability of civil war in a nation where half the population lives in poverty, the farmers here just don't have the resources to live any other way. And so, environmental cautions, like smoke from the fields, are thrown to the wind. Andy Xue and Jonathan Kaplan for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more of our stories. Finally, we bring you to Seoul for South Korea's Lotus Lantern Festival, a religious and cultural event held ahead of the Buddha's birthday. I'm Jeremy Olivier. Take care and see you next time.
I'm Tiffany Wong in Kuala Lumpur, and you're watching Taiwan Plus.